Hello, everyone. Welcome to what used to be the 21 Hats podcast and is now the Business Advantage TV podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, we introduce a new member of the podcast team, Paul Downs, whose company, Paul Downs Cabinetmakers, makes custom conference tables. Paul wrote about how close his company came to failing in both the New York Times You're the Boss blog and in his own book, Boss Life: Surviving My Own Small Business. That was back during the Great Recession. Unfortunately, Paul's company is once again finding it a challenge to sell high-end conference tables during a crisis, especially one that has cleared out offices and sent people working from home. My game plan is to stick it out, Paul tells us in this episode. I'm not going to shut the doors, and 2 years from now, I may be a smaller company, but I'm going to be around, and then we're going to ride this back up. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations will, if nothing else, let owners know they are not alone in facing these challenges. Along with Paul, who you will see brings intelligence and transparency to our sessions, this week's lineup features Jay Goltz, whose businesses in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home, and Dana White, who is CEO of Paralee Boyd, a hair salon in Detroit. This episode is titled, I'm Not Going to Shut the Doors. All right, so let's get started. Welcome back, Dana and Jay, and welcome for the first time, Paul Downs. Paul, it's great to have you here.
Nice to see you, Jay, and Dana. I've been following your journey with great interest, and I think that what you've done is really admirable, and I'm really pleased to be a part of this group.
Well, we're pleased to have you. I'd love to start by giving our listeners some background about you, Paul. When I was editing that You're the Boss blog at the Times, I got an email from you. You told me in that email that you were running a business that was in the process of failing and heading for bankruptcy, and you wanted to know if I was interested in having you write about that process. First of all, why were you failing? What was going on?
I wrote you in December of 2009, about a little more than a year after the Great Recession struck. And to set it up, in the fall of 2008, if I had given myself the Jay Goltz 5-point quick business crisis evaluation test.
Jay, he has been listening, hasn't he?
Excellent.
I'll go through them. How were you doing before the crisis? Profitable, not profitable? We were losing money, my partner and I, in buckets, and so 0 for that. What legal obligations did I have to others? I had a partner who would put a lot of money into the business and expected money back, so I scored 0 for that. How is my attitude? Ready for a fight or exhausted? Now, I scored well on that because I had no intention of going out of business. And did you or will you lose key employees? Well, I had to lay off half my team. I had 23 employees in September of 2009 and went down to 13 in October of 2009. And by the time I wrote to Lauren, I was down to 6 people. So, yeah, we lost a lot of people. And then what financial resources did I have available? Not much. And I just knew that after 25 years of running my business by myself, that I was probably unemployable. And I did not want to go out and try to start a new career. So that's where I was.
How did you turn it around?
Well, I didn't turn it around. The economy turned around. The questions that I would use to supplement Jay's test would be, 1, what vast forces are working for and against you? And in that case, the economy had delivered some punches to an already damaged company, but it started to pick back up and people started to want my product again. And that brings me to the second of my supplemental questions, which is what's happening with your customers? And we were starting to get people who were interested in buying tables again. And so it was that more than anything else that brought me out from death's door. But I will say that when I started writing for the Times, it was the first time I had the chance to really air the things that were the problems I was encountering and get feedback from someone other than my partner. And My partner is a lovely person. He's passed on, unfortunately. And when we disagreed about business, he never let it get personal. And when he started to lose money, he took his lumps. But I had really relied on him as being the sole source of information about what we should do next. And that was an enormous mistake because he was someone who was 20 years older than me and just had a viewpoint that wasn't really aligned with what was happening to us. So writing for the Times, I would say, was the big turning point in my personal journey, and starting to implement some of the suggestions I received from the readers, and being put in touch with people like Jay, and then through them joining a business group that I'm still a member of, and just starting to learn a lot more about how to be a boss and how to run a business than what I've been able to teach myself.
How long were you in business at that point?
I started the business January 1st, 1986. So whatever that would have been, 22 years.
How did you have the energy to keep going?
The thing about business is you only fail when you shut the doors. And until you actually spend that very last dollar and walk away from the building, you haven't actually failed yet. And so in December of 2009, I could see it coming. It was literally weeks away. I could model out my cash flow, how much I had on hand, and how much I was spending. So I started looking online for information about what happens when a Main Street business fails, and found literally nothing. And that is why I reached out to Lauren. But why did I keep going through that? Because, I come to get up in the morning and do the same thing I'd been doing for 22 years. Until I actually have failed, I haven't failed. I could be failing. You could be failing for a long time. I was failing for, I would say, 24 of the 22 years. It took me a few years to really dig out of it. But I wasn't failing quite as fast as I was succeeding in some other ways. Yeah, I was in this terrible situation, but I've been in bad situations for years and years and years, and I just really hadn't given up yet. So that's the answer. Just hadn't given up yet.
Yeah, you haven't failed until you've failed. So if you're down to your last dollar and you're getting ready to turn in the keys of your business, do you turn in the keys and put the dollar in your pocket? Or do you hang on to the keys for as long as you can and take that dollar and do something with it that would in turn allow your business to turn around? I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I would say that aside from playing offense, which is what you may use that dollar on, that there is one critical thing, which is just to keep the lights on. And because you don't know what's about to happen.
Right.
And what happened to me on the last day of 2009 is a client placed a nice order, and that got me another 5 weeks. And then in that 5 weeks, somebody else placed an order. And,
Nice.
It's just like it was. If I'd walked out, then I wouldn't have gotten that phone call, and then it would be over. But if you can just hang on, maybe the vast forces that are always at work on everybody may start to go in your favor as opposed to against you.
Did you do everything that you were supposed to do? Like, did you do all the marketing? Is that what led to the failing? Or were there some things that you hadn't done that with the new orders coming in gave you an opportunity to grow and save the business?
Well, I'll tell you, there's always things that I haven't done. And I think I'm just going to plant this flag right now in the first 10 minutes of being on this podcast, which is I am the worst business person on this podcast. And I am not as concerned with sacrificing every ounce of my energy and resources to make the business succeed as some others are.
Okay.
And it's just not who I am. And part of the reason for that is that I have a family, and particularly at that time, I had kids in the house, and one of my kids has special needs. He's severely autistic. So that whatever I put into the business, I still have to reserve something to go home and deal with that. And then the other thing is, in the course of having an autistic child for the last, he's 26 now, you always run across something that you as the parent are encouraged to try. And it's this miracle cure, it's that miracle cure. And you get to the point fairly quickly when you realize you just can't do everything. You can't do it all. Some of it is pure quackery and some of it may not be, but you just can't do it all. I found that I had to make a choice about how we would treat that situation and how much energy we would put into it and how much my wife and I would try to reserve for my other children and how much I would personally try to reserve for my business and just try to keep it all in balance. So I'm never going to say there's not something that someone could suggest to me like, oh, you should try this. And they're probably right. And it may even work. But if I'm not capable of fitting it into my overall life, I tend to not do it. And that I'm sure means that the business is not as successful as it could have been. On the other hand, I'm now in year 35 and it could be a lot worse. I've seen a lot worse.
Paul, I don't want you to sell yourself short. I mean, you all the things you said, I'm aware of, and I know about the importance of your family to you. That's all certainly true. But I also know, having edited your blog posts at the New York Times, that you threw yourself into understanding the dynamics of your business in a way, I've seen few people do, whether it was understanding the mechanics of Google pay-per-click or understanding Obamacare when it got released. You would devote countless hours to trying to understand these things and figure out how to make them work for your business. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Well, can I comment on that? I'm sorry, just quickly. First of all, I am very interested in understanding the underlying things that happen in my business. And I love setting up spreadsheets and following data series. And those things make me feel busy and make me feel smart, but don't necessarily make the business any better. So it's a form of self-indulgence at times, because there are definitely things that I could be doing always that would make the business better. The second thing is, before I wrote for the Times, I never wrote for anybody, and nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared at all about what I had to say about anything. If you hire someone like me to write in the New York Times, and suddenly you've got an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, and you can, by looking into things which are ordinarily hidden, bring that in a succinct way to thousands and thousands of business owners who could use that information. That's a big incentive to do that extra digging, to do that extra work. And so a lot of what you saw out of me, Lauren, was in response to the realization that I had the ability to shine a light on things that large institutions keep hidden from most of us because it's to their benefit. So I really enjoyed that role of being the everyman's champion, and that drove a lot of what I did when I was writing.
Well, there's another aspect of it. You referred to your partner. It was a difficult relationship, and you went from having an older person who you trusted to guide most of the business decisions while you were making beautiful tables to taking full responsibility for the business. And I'm curious, looking back now, how you think that affected the turnaround of your business.
Well, it had a big effect on it because I took responsibility for things that, decisions mostly, that I had been assuming were not my, it was my skin in the game, but it wasn't I just didn't know enough to feel like I owned a decision. But then once my partner and I came to the point where we couldn't agree on how to operate the company, and this was in late 2008, then I was like, well, okay, I'm just going to do what I need to do. And so knowing that I wasn't tied down by our agreement to agree on what we were doing anymore, that put me in a different position. And I had been in that position prior to getting a partner in 2002, but the world and Jay, you lived through this. You started business I was age 22.
Me too.
This was 1986. There's no internet. There's nothing. Nothing. I had never worked for anybody. And I just, I run on self-confidence, basically. But tied to extreme ignorance for most of my time prior to having a partner. I had no idea what I was doing and no way to find out. And it's just like it was a completely different world. So all of that experience didn't really help in the newer world. And it was starting to write for the Times and realize, wait, now we can make connections. Now you can reach out to people for free instantly, or you can hear the benefit of their thoughts, or you can meet people and share information and share experiences. It's just a way different world now. And so that had a big effect on my willingness to assume responsibility.
We both started at 22, and the difference is you are extremely self-aware. You've always been extremely self-aware. That's why I love you. You really think about things. You process things. So the question is, who was in a worse spot? Me, who never had any partner, and I had to figure it out, but I also didn't have any false. You had a partner that, because he was 20 years older than you assumed he knew how to run a business, and you followed that. I didn't have that. And that's an interesting parallel because we both have the same thing in common. I started at 22, you started at 22, and we were thrown into this business world that is far more complicated than it appears.
Well, I think that you may, I mean, I don't know, but maybe you had other connections into your community that were helpful to you.
No, I didn't. I really didn't.
Synagogue or?
No, absolutely
nothing?
Not. Nothing.
Okay.
No, you did. No, Jay, you did. You had an uncle who had a dime store.
No, that's my father and my.
That's your father. Yeah,
it was my uncle and my father, but they had one employee, and I learned how to give customer service. I learned that it's all about the customer, but beyond that, I could literally tell you the day that my father called me. I will tell you the day my father called me. I was growing really fast. Keep in mind, my father's store was my aunt, my uncle, my mother, my father, my grandparents, and Edna, one employee for my whole life, and until my grandparents passed on. So that was my whole exposure to business. I don't even know what the business did. It probably did all of $150,000 a year. So that was my perspective. Take care of customers. I didn't know any different. My father called me I was probably 32, 34. Hey, how's it going there? And I said to him, yeah, I just had to fire as Lauren knows, I wrote about this. I went through 10 production managers over a period of 3 years. So I just fired one more production manager, except this time he had a wife and kid and he was younger, and I was really kind of torn up on it. I knew he had to go, but so my father calls me and I said, I had to fire the production manager and I kind of feel bad. And my father gave me one of his lines. He was like a jukebox. You'd hit the button in one of his lines. He would, what the problem today is? People want a job, but they don't want to work. And I said, yeah, Dad, that's it. And ever since that day, I never asked him anything anymore because I realized he was way out of his depth, and there was nothing. I couldn't talk to him about finances. I couldn't talk to him about marketing. I couldn't talk to him about management. He gave me a couple of tips along the way, like the officers don't eat with the enlisted men. He was in World War II. And there was a few little quips, I would say, but beyond that, I really didn't have anybody to talk to.
So in the time we have left, let's jump ahead. It's been more than 10 years since you dealt with that crisis, Paul. We are now in the middle of another one, as you well know. Tell us, how is your business coping with the pandemic and the economic crisis?
Getting back to the 5-point test, I'd score a 5 on February 29th of 2020. We were coming into it profitable, and I no longer had a partner, and good attitude because we've had good years, and I feel like I'm much better at running the business than I was, and have a great set of employees, and we had work on hand, and we had money, and I have money in the bank at home, and mortgage paid off and all that. So in good shape going into it. And we've weathered it up till today quite well. We had to shut down in late March because the state ordered us to shut down. And we stayed shut till the end of April. And I reopened on the day I got my PPP money. And we resumed work on a 10-week backlog of orders we had. And we lost a lot of money in March and April, but we've made it all back up in May and June. And company is profitable.
Who's buying conference tables right now, Paul? Who are you selling to?
That's the problem, is that the number of people who are calling us for new orders has dropped by 75%. And so I can see the trouble is going to arrive for me most likely in September and through the rest of the year. And that I would be fairly surprised if we're able to match our current sales or production pace next year. I don't know how far it'll fall, because if you think about it, a giant conference table isn't necessarily the most COVID-friendly product you ever could imagine. And but there are a lot of empty buildings going up, and people tend to finish projects that have been financed. We saw that same dynamic in 2009, that the beginning of the year wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been, and it was a year after the crisis that it really hit us. So that's where we are. I'm great right now, and I can see storm clouds on the horizon. And so I'm a little worried about that.
How about your competition? I mean, are there less people doing what you do now?
There will be, and that's my game plan, honestly. I think that we've explored the idea of pivoting into other products. And for many years, before I got into conference tables, I actually did high-end residential work. And I kind of have a horror of going back to that.
High-end residential work, meaning building furniture for residences?
Yes, for individual people. And, God bless them. My clients were, for the most part, all lovely. But it's a business that has really changed since the late 80s and 90s because of cheap imports. And people's attitudes towards owning, say, a dining set are just different. And the sales process involves a lot of nights and weekends, and I just don't have the stomach for it. Whereas the corporate and government clients are just way easier to deal with. They spend a lot more money because it's not their own personal money. And we've been able to build a much more successful business doing that. So my game plan is to stick it out. I'm not going to shut the doors, and we're going to hope this kills the competition. And 2 years from now, I may be a smaller company, but I'm going to be around, and then we're going to ride this back up.
I have to tell you, I looked at your website. Good for you. Your website's beautiful. You say meaningful stuff on there. I love on the contact page, you say, if it's during business hours, we'll get back to you within minutes. I mean, all your copy, everything you wrote on there is all meaningful and poignant and authentic. And I am confident you will be one of the survivors at the end of this, because you're doing a good job, period. And your competition's going to run out of steam at some point, some of them.
Well, thanks, Jay. I would hope the writing's good. I did all of it myself.
There are also a lot of pretty pictures of beautiful tables.
Yeah, there are. We've been very fortunate in the range of people who've approached us and the quality of clients who we've been able to work with. It's easy to do great work for good clients.
I would challenge your word fortunate. You weren't fortunate. You make great products, you care, you've got a great looking website, and you earn those customers. So you didn't just get lucky. You earned every one of those customers. I'm
going to tell you this story, and I'm going to tell it as fast as I can, which is how we got into the conference table business. And this happened in 2003. But I made my first conference table, just one, in 1999 for a local client. And we put a picture of it up on my very first website in the same year. And this is a website that was all about high-end residential furniture, dining tables, chairs, the things we specialized in. And then there was a section on the site of some other stuff we'd done, like some church furniture and this and that. And here's this boardroom table. In 2003, Google chose that picture out of everything that was on the internet to be the top search result for boardroom table. They just did it. They just did it one day. And I remember clearly getting a call from a guy in South Dakota and who said, "Hey, I see your boardroom table. Can you make me one of these?" And I'm in my office. I'm like, "Who in the world are you? And why would you even call me about? How did you find me?" I never even heard of Google. And 3 days later, I'm on the phone with someone in Kyrgyzstan who's putting up an oil company headquarters. And the following week, we got sent a set of plans for a Saudi Arabian prince, his weekend home in Jeddah. He needed 4 tables for each of his wives. That's luck. Okay?
No, you're wrong.
Tell me
it's not luck. You were the best looking table.
No,
Google
wait.
chose it.
It was after that was a lot of hard work and thinking about what was going on and figuring out how to do the business. But you can't say that was anything other than lucky, because it was.
I'm not saying there wasn't some luck, but you made the best looking table and you got to work. You earned it.
Timing was important too. Yeah. Timing,
Some luck.
Yeah, I was there, but there's a motto inlaid on my desk, which I live by. Fortune favors a prepared mind. This is from Madame Curie. And fortune, the first word, you got to acknowledge it exists. There's luck. There's luck in this world. There's luck when the sperm meets the egg.
Paul, those initial clients you got after the photo sound like pretty ideal clients, but I'm guessing that's not your typical customer. Who is your typical customer these days?
I should point out that we didn't actually make a sale to any of those people because I didn't really know how to respond. But the interesting thing was that the calls kept coming, and we generally get, well, at least before March, we would get anywhere from 3 to a dozen every day. And this is for the last, whatever it is, 17 years now. Our typical client right now is someone who needs a table, and it could literally be anybody. We do business with people you've heard of and giant organizations and billionaires, and we do business with little tiny companies and people you would never think need to go custom. But our thing is they all call us, so let's figure out how to do business with all of them. And so we figured out how to have a conversation with anybody and to identify a budget and to try to come up with a solution. And so we don't really have a typical client other than there's someone who's not finding what they look for in a catalog.
How has your approach to pricing changed through the years, Paul?
Well, that was actually a very difficult thing to come up with because there's not much information available on the pricing of these items. You can't find it anywhere on the internet then, and very difficult now. And so we just came up with some wild guesses for the first 10 years. And then eventually I sat down and wrote a very complicated spreadsheet that would allow my sales guys to at least come up with numbers in some systematic way. And we have since discovered over time that our prices are basically market acceptable because people bought stuff from us. But it's difficult. It would be like trying to find pricing on, I can't even think what, like a submarine. If you needed to go buy a submarine, what does it cost? I don't know. It depends on the submarine, right? And then who's selling them? Well, they don't sell them at the corner store, so you're going to have to do some digging. And our method is to try to short circuit people's investigation process by sending them, by helping them as soon as we can. That's why we call people back within a minute, because we don't want them to go anywhere else. We just want them to feel like they're getting the information and then that they will stop shopping for other people.
Why is it like pricing a submarine? I understand your tables are custom, but isn't the price determined largely by the size of the table?
Yes and no. Size, materials, complexity. That's the basics. But within those 3 parameters, a table of a given size could cost X or it could cost 100X. When
did you start thinking about, in doing your pricing, whether you were charging enough to make a profit?
I always think about that. The difficulty with not having sort of widely understood prices for things is that you don't really know how your client is going to react to whatever you present to them. So I have to constantly battle this fear that my salespeople have that what they're showing is just too expensive and they want to try to cut deals somehow. And one of the reasons I wrote the pricing spreadsheet was just to stop that, or at least put a floor on what we would sell things for. And then the pricing spreadsheet not only kicks out a number, it kicks out a prediction of how long things would take to build on the shop floor. And so then we have some standards to tell the people on the shop floor, and then we collect data about how long it actually takes them to do stuff. And what I've found over the course of years is that you can set up a rational system for coming up with a number and a prediction of time. And then when you start tracking what actually happens out in the shop, the closer you look, the more everything just falls apart. And that the only way to really consider it is in aggregate because we have such an inconsistent product. It could be this one day and that the other day, and they could be very, very different. And you never repeat yourself. And so that what I started looking at was instead of trying to master every little bit of the equation, would be just how do you simplify this? What do we need to know at the end of the day? And I've broken it down to at the end of the day, we need to have revenues. We need to ship $360,000 worth of tables every month in order to break even. And if we can bake that, if we can go higher, we make money. If we go lower, we lose money. And that's something that I can very easily explain to my team and we can keep track of. And we have a lot of data that looks closer than that, but that's a simplification. And having grown my business from zero up to 4-point-some million a year now, I have a pretty good idea of what the ratios would look like at any given revenue target. So I'm expecting the business to contract by maybe 40% next year. And I have a very good idea of what the Paul Downs Cabinetmakers that will produce 2.4 million in revenues in 2021 will look like. And if we get back to 5 million in revenues, I know what that'll look like. And so that's the profitability calculation for me at this point. And there's a lot more to it, but it probably isn't really suitable for explanation in a podcast unless we're targeting the need to go to sleep.
How much of your experience surviving the last crisis is informing what you're doing now? Did you learn things there that you think are helping you prepare to survive this one?
Yeah, the most important lesson was as we were going into the fall of 2008, my partner and I were disagreeing about how we would run the business. We were already losing money. We knew there was trouble. Without even the whole economy collapsing, we knew we were in trouble. And my partner's theory was that you keep all this information from the employees. Don't tell them. And because he was worried that people would quit and go start looking for another job. And keeping in mind that in the summer of 2008 is very similar to, say, the summer of 2019, where unemployment was pretty low. And if you had good people, you want to keep them. So he said, you cannot talk about our problems with the employees. I disagreed with that because that's just not who I am. But, we're partners, so I didn't. And then the day came when I had to lay everybody off. And it turned out they already knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what it was. And then after that layoff, I decided that I would not play that game anymore. And I told all the people who left that one way or another, I will tell you the truth. I will answer your questions and I will try to keep you abreast of my thinking on our situation so that you're never surprised. And that approach has stood me in good stead ever since then. I ran into some rough years in times when the economy wasn't doing so badly, particularly in 2016, 17, and 18. My autistic son started living at home with us after being away at school for 10 years. And that really had an extreme impact on my ability to work. And the company started to fail again. And I had to get to a point, actually, where I had to cut everybody's wages. And I told them it was happening as it was happening. Like, here's the problem. We're running out of cash. Sales are not as good as they could be. I don't want to shut the doors, and this is what we're going to do. You're all taking a 15% wage cut. And I was able to say, and here's what I'm doing. I'm taking a 100% wage cut and show them the numbers and show them a P&L. And then when things got better, bring them back on, show them what happened.
You said you were distracted during that period for obvious and understandable reasons. What was the direct impact of that distraction? What wasn't happening? Why did the company flounder while your mind was elsewhere?
Because companies need a leader. And my team is very capable, but there's no one who is able to do exactly what I do. I just had the experience of driving across Indiana on the Indiana Turnpike. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've ever done that. It's dead straight for 180 miles.
Yep.
And you would be tempted to think you could just take your hand off the steering wheel and start reading the paper, and you'll be in the ditch almost instantly. And running a business is like that. Even if you've got a very well-functioning engine and set of tires, and everything's going swimmingly and you're blasting along at 70 miles an hour, if there's nobody on the steering wheel looking all the way out to the horizon for the accidents up ahead, then you're in the ditch.
I have a different answer for you. It's the size company you are running versus my size company. The people you have working there in charge are not capable of steering the ship. That's true with your size, but when one gets bigger, you're not as hands-on as you are at that point. My answer to you at that point is you were very hands-on at that point, and you were doing important stuff at the company, and it makes sense that if you weren't there, it wasn't getting done. You get bigger, you've got more capable people making more money that have been there, and it's not necessarily the same thing.
I would agree with that. I think that my experience just growing from 0 employees to 24, which is what we have today, there's huge differences every time you add 5 employees, and that I'm right at the point where I'm not big enough to have a real layer of professional managers.
No, for sure.
And that if I got to your size, Jay, I would have that because I would want that.
No, I've been there. You're the quarter. The point is you're the quarterback still. You're not the coach. You're still the quarterback. That's the difference.
Dana, we've talked a little bit about what Paul raised in terms of sharing information with employees. I'm curious if you have any reaction to the way he has shifted his thinking on that.
No, I agree with him. It sounds to me as if Paul's team, he could walk in and say, hey, guys, I'm going to cut your salary by 15%. I'm going to take 100% cut. Or, hey, guys, we're in a little bit of a financial strait right now. I know businesses that you could not do that and expect to keep your doors open. They would literally jump ship immediately and go find someplace else. It just depends on the culture of the industry that you're working in.
I think that's absolutely right. Woodworkers are in general very low drama, want to know what they're doing tomorrow and next week and next month kind of people. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like hairdressers are just cut from different cloths. So yes. Also the configuration of the business. So if I was running an ice cream shack and all my employees were teenagers and I was taking $1 million a year out of it, I wouldn't have those conversations because there's no way to make that situation look like we're all in this together. Mm-hmm. In my own situation, I make money and it's not an unreasonable amount of money, and I pay them as well as they can possibly be paid. And everybody just gets that, it's part of being there.
Jay, we got to wrap up quickly. I don't want to start a long discussion about open book management, but I'm curious if you have any reaction to what Paul said about sharing information, especially during difficult times.
Well, I think the naivete of his partner was they can obviously see that they're not making as much furniture. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're not talking about it. So there's somewhere between total open book management and saying nothing. So I believe in tell people how things are going. Say, listen, we're in a cash bind. It depends on the business, depends on the sophistication of your employees. I don't think a blanket thing of totally open book management is the way to go. I think it depends on the business and the circumstances, but certainly communicating with your employees how you're doing and where you're at makes sense because they know about it anyway. Who are you hiding from? They can see the production's way off. So thinking if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist is silly. I mean, they know about it. So I do believe you have to communicate with your employees.
Well, I would actually add one other point, which is if you don't, they know about it, but they don't know what the actual facts are. And what I've found is that when you don't provide real information, people just make stuff up.
Absolutely.
So they think they know about it. They think they know how much you make, the boss makes. They think they know that if we sold 4 million, that means I made 3.5 million. And if you don't give them the real information and some background on it, then you're really fighting a losing battle.
I suspect we will have more conversations about this Paul, thank you so much for joining us. One thing I knew from my experience working with you previously is that you would be open and transparent and share with us, and you have not disappointed. So welcome to the team. As always, thank you, Dana, and thank you, Jay. Thanks for listening, everybody. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Remember, we started the 21 Hats podcast to help business owners feel a little less isolated, to let them know they aren't the only ones fighting these battles. If you got something out of this conversation, please help us reach more people. Tell a friend, subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at 21_hats. And let me know if you have a question or a comment or a topic you'd like us to cover. My email address is lfeldman@21hats.com. See you next time.